Hello and welcome to Podcast of the Rings, a podcast that started because the Rings of Power TV show was coming to air, and now it has come and gone, and Alex and I are like a sailboat without a halbrand or a Galadriel without a dagger. But not until the end of this episode, right, Alex?
And we're jumping off that boat. Who knows what awaits us?
Great. Yeah, you really sailed the metaphor home. Thanks for that. So yeah, we're here to wrap up our thoughts on season 1 of The Rings of Power. We started the podcast because we knew the TV show was going to be coming out. We also knew we had a shared interest in Tolkien. I mean, you're obsessed, so I guess shared interest is an understatement. And we knew it was going to be a great kickoff to us starting our own show. And so we're going to wrap this up and then head out into, Grey Havens, right? Is that what it is? And do some more episodes about different things after this one.
Oh, yeah. And I have a feeling, based on some news that we've known for a little bit, that we'll be maybe talking about the Grey Havens and one who dwells there, maybe in future episodes.
Círdan.
Yeah.
The shipwright.
Yeah.
I know a little bit. I know that I'm retaining things. And yes, I think there's certain things I want to unpack about the characters that we've learned in the show. Some of the lore that they touched on in the show, I think we can dedicate segments or episodes to those things. But as far as dedicated Rings of Power, concentrated Alex Jess power, this is it, folks. We're going to tell you our thoughts about the overarching thoughts of season 1, The Rings of Power. Mm-hmm. And reminder, this is the podcast of the Rings. Howdy, Alex.
Hi, Jess.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing well. This week, there was a lot of processing, ruminating, sitting with season 1. I did a rewatch, and it's interesting because we're going to be talking about the season in its entirety today, which is a lot. It's 8 hours of television.
Sit back, folks. Longest episode of ours yet.
Yeah, we're going to go for... we have been going almost twice the runtime of each episode, so this will be a 16-hour episode. No, we're going to go broad strokes here, but I have to say, I think general impressions upon doing this rewatch, if we're talking about the whole season, some of the things that I had issue with in the beginning, I think were cleared up in terms of pacing in the beginning of the season, at least. It didn't feel, and maybe it's because I knew what was coming. Maybe it's because I was watching some of these episodes, 2 at a time.
Sure.
But I didn't feel like it didn't feel as much of a slog as some of those early episodes I felt when I first watched it. I don't know. How did you feel about now that we've seen the whole thing and you've rewatched season 1? Does it feel sluggish out the gate to you, or?
I honestly, I think they did. I'm even more impressed with the show watching it all in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
Well, as much as one can.
Yeah, we didn't do a 8-hour marathon.
No, but at the same time, I'm so glad they didn't release all 8 episodes, because the specialness of every episode, at the same time, I should say, the specialness of every episode, we were able to relish it and examine and enjoy it because it was week by week. So I wouldn't I wouldn't encourage us to want it to have been released in any different way. But when you put them all together, I am not going to have a problem watching this a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now. And I don't know that I'll get bored. And and like that's something like you watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy extended version every Christmas.
Every year, yeah.
And that's not boring to you. That is something about it is so special to you. And for multiple reasons.
Yeah, and upon rewatching, there were a couple moments where, like, I think in particular the one that jumps out to me because we just rewatched it was in episode was it episode 6, I think, Udun, right? Where Theo has the quote-unquote sword hilt, the fake sword hilt, and he unwraps it and sees, it's just this hatchet. But I didn't notice upon first watch that the reason
or
he
second watch.
Well, I noticed it. Or second watch. Yeah, this was probably, I think, the third or fourth time the fourth time I've seen that episode. The reason he notices that to unwrap it is because it doesn't reach down to where that like mark is on his arm. And he's like, wait, what? Because that's where he, stabs it. So I think, if I were to rewatch this season again, which I don't think I'm going to anytime soon, but I think at some point down the line I will, there's probably going to be new stuff I notice in each episode. So I think there's a lot happening. It's a dense show. Despite some issues I still have with it, I think there's a lot of great things happening. So
sure. And I do want to unpack those. I will say this. I think people like yourself are exactly who the show's for and exactly who the show isn't for. Because you guys know way too much about the lore to allow it to be what it is, which is a show that gets people into a world that they never understood, never heard of a single person before. Yes. The only two people that are familiar are Elrond and Galadriel, and most of the people that are sort of familiar with them only understand them as far as the glimpses of the movies are concerned, which is its own interpretation too, by the way, is what I'm learning. So I talking to a couple friends and talking to other people, we've actually had some really amazing introspective Brad Grens, another, our coiner of the Onto Moment.
Yes. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad. Really gave some very, very thoughtful, detailed feedback about what he'd like to see, what he felt he didn't need. And honestly, I found myself agreeing with everything he was saying. It's almost too much to talk about. But the first thing I want to mention is that Brad said that he thinks The Stranger might be too Can-Sam. And I think that's right.
Nailed it.
So... long way to say. Some of my most intelligent friends, one of my most intelligent friends told me she's watching the show and she said she loved it. She's also not a Tolkien person and she's never read the books. She's a very well-read human who I would go to for advice on any storytelling. So what that says to me is they did an amazing job of making something digestible that otherwise really isn't. Also, while not having, I'm sorry, I know it's digestible. I saw Alex give a side eye. It's not an easily digestible. Like, even I think one of the first questions I asked you was, is there like a theme that you can remember yet from the episodes or the shows? And you're like, oh no, not really, except for the Howard
music cues. You mean?
Yeah. And then you watch it a couple times, and now I can't stop thinking about
the love theme.
I can't stop. Yeah. It's so permeating and so beautiful, and Bear kills it. But so you've read the Silmarillion 5 times, so those things stick with you. You've read Lord of the Rings, and so you're like, wait, who is Gil-galad? Because they reference him in ad nauseum,
And here's what I'll say. There are a couple points I wanted to address in what you just said because I agree with a lot of it. Number one, I also talked to someone who they were asking me like, oh, what do I need to do? What do I need to consume, read, watch before Rings of Power so I'm ready? And I said to them, just watch Rings of Power.
You shouldn't have to.
And I think, look, everybody enters the Tolkien fandom from something different. I saw it was a while back, someone, I think it was before actually Rings of Power came out, they had a tweet and they were asking people to respond. And they said, just curious. Oh, no, it was after the first couple episodes. And they said, just curious. Let me know what you think of Rings of Power, just a yay or nay, and what your first exposure to Tolkien was. And I read through it and I was seeing all these different answers. And everybody falls in love with a different thing in the Tolkien world first. For some people it was just reading The Hobbit. For some people it was reading Lord of the Rings. For some people it was seeing Peter Jackson's films, either the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the Hobbit trilogy.
Right.
For some people it was the Rankin Bass Hobbit cartoon, right? So there's so many, maybe even the Ralph Bakshi movie, which I would love to have that as my entry point because that movie is wild. We may have to cover that in the future. I would love to watch that with you. And now we're getting a new generation of Tolkien fans who this is their entry point. And I love that because they are going to have a different perspective on Tolkien's world because of it. I'm someone who I read the books, but I would say my real falling in love entry point that I remember like most vividly was like going to the theaters and seeing the Peter Jackson films. It was after I'd read The Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but that was what like captured me in a certain way. And I still, I'm reading Lord of the Rings 2 now, and I still do like those voices, like the films a lot of the time. So, so that's one point I would say. Like, I love that this is bringing new people in, and that people, as you said, people who are not at all familiar are enjoying the show, and maybe enjoying it more than people like myself who are burdened with all this knowledge. But that brings me to the second point I wanted to address in what you
weirdest
said.
humble brag on the planet.
Look, I got to take my victories where I can get them. Is that I think there's an obsession in some fans' minds, and there's a misconception about what it means to be a Tolkien fan of like knowing all of these things. And that being the source of enjoyment. And for some people it is. But what I would argue with is I would argue that if you read Lord of the Rings, right, or even The Hobbit, and you are just reading that text, there are so many names, there are so many places that you get just the tiniest glimpse of, right? For example, we're in Lothlorien now in our reread, and we have Legolas singing a song about the old king of Lorien, King Amroth.
Which, this is brand new to me.
Yeah.
I mean, like, just to be honest, I read that's my gateway was the books. And when you get through 17 names in one sentence, you just move on, like. Right. But the river lady and wait.
Nimrindel.
Did Tom Bombadil steal Nimrindel? Is it her?
That's a theory.
It's a good theory.
I mean, different rivers.
Yeah, but are there lilies that exist in the Silver Lode? And that's why he needs to get her lilies so that, like, 'cause she's not at the right river.
Yeah, but is Tom Bombadil Nimrindel or Amroth Sauron? Which one?
Wait, is Amroth Sauron? Hold on.
What has this show created?
What have you done to me? Is Amroth in that story actually Sauron?
Sauron?
Okay, just move on.
No, I have to bring attention to it. No, he's not. He's just a king.
Okay, so I listen, he's had many names. He's been awake before the breaking of the first silence. I need to know if you're screwing with me.
Look, it can't be ruled out.
Okay, so my point is I don't even recollect that. And now I want to know that story so badly. Right. And I couldn't have guessed I was too young. I couldn't have guessed when I was a kid reading all this that there was so much work that went into this.
Yeah. But when
I
you
knew
read,
it, but I couldn't have noted
and I think that's like the point is you read this story and you don't at first the thing that captures you isn't like getting the full detailed history, you know, of all these names that are mentioned. It's just like feeling immersed in a world that is rich and detailed and that exists for you to discover maybe later on your own if you want to, now that we have so many texts published. But back in the day, you know, it was just Lord of the Rings. And you know, you could go through the appendices and read stuff too. But so I would say you don't need that deep level of knowledge to appreciate or enjoy what's in Rings of Power. And I think if you're just fascinated by the fact that it is deep and rich and there are references, you know, you don't need to know all of it. It's just cool if you're like, oh, they name drop something that I don't know. Maybe later I'll go check it out. Like that's
maybe, and it's okay if you don't want to do it. I think,
yeah, but it's in the spirit of Tolkien. I think
I understand you. I think anybody that says there's one right way, or I know everything, thus I'm the real fan, or you're not. This is something that's talked about over at Roddenberry and Star Trek. It has yet to happen with the Orville. Well, actually, that's not true. People are saying it's the best. The Orville's the best Star Trek out right now. So, any time you start telling somebody how they're supposed to enjoy it, or that you're not a real fan, they're wrong. They're just point blank wrong. Everyone's a fan. You're allowed to be a fan, no matter what your level of fan is. You can be. I don't even think casual fan is fair. You can be that's why it was very important. You are an expert at this stuff very purposefully. You have spent time. You care to learn this stuff. It does not make you better than anybody. No. It doesn't make you a better fan than anybody.
Importantly, I'm not going to, as you said, I can have the opinion. Yeah, I don't have this opinion, but I could. Rings of Power is the worst Tolkien thing that's ever been made. That's fine if I think that. But then to go and say, oh, you like this? Well, that means you're the worst Tolkien fan ever. No.
The only Star Trek people I want to talk to are the people who are like, I love Discovery. Or actually, I don't like it, but I'm so glad you like it. Because whatever, it's not for me. I think a whole subset of geeks are used to getting picked on. And now that their thing is cool, they get to have the authority and only know how to interact with people negatively because they were interacted with poorly as well, and are literally forcing the socialized way that they were dealt with and doing it to other people because they finally feel like they have some power. It's very sad when you think about it. Anyway, I just feel like that's not a conversation that's inherent only to Tolkien. It's all over the nerd space.
Yeah,
and it's unfortunate because it does muddy the water of actually just enjoying something or talking about it.
Yeah, and talking honestly, openly, and critically about this show.
Sure.
Because, look, I don't like everything in this show. I've been honest about that. I like a lot of stuff in the show, but when you
it's
have
not above reproach.
Correct. But when you have this shadow, and we talked about this a little bit, but when you have this shadow of these horrendous people being jerks online because of people liking the show and because they, for whatever reasons they have, there's many, just want to see this show not succeed, it makes it hard to talk about openly and honestly. So, but I want to do that, and I think we've done a good job so far of doing that. But let's, I think, go through and talk about the things in season 1 that let's start positive. What were, Jess?
2,500 minutes in.
Yes. What were your favorite? Did you have I would say maybe a favorite scene or moment? B, your favorite character or character arc, and C, a favorite locale, because this it's like Middle Earth is the fifth character.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah.
I mean, not to keep going back to it, but in reading Lord of the Rings to you, you're now I think rediscovering the length at which Tolkien describes geography and locations. Very important are the settings to Tolkien. So what's your favorite setting in season?
Well, really quickly, in my mind, while we're reading, I'm like, this should really be called the Good Morning, Good Night book, because it's just like, and then they went to sleep, and then they ate, and then they...
A lot of travel and description of the lands they're traveling through.
But at the same time, God, what a challenge it must have been to make everything distinct and not be the same in a row, and he's so successful at it. But yeah, it really is. And then food again, and then they walked, and then go to sleep.
Yeah.
But they got attacked, but we're going to move on quickly from that. I hate to break it to you.
Oh, no.
But I think I love the Halbrand story more than anything else in the entire series. And not his 100%. I think it is.
Jess.
I know.
I said we were going to start positive. And you do this to me.
You're gatekeeping me right now.
I'm not gatekeeping. I can have my opinion. I'm letting you have yours, but I'm going to be negative right now.
The more I think about it, the more I like it. The better he becomes as an actor, the sexier he's become.
I'm not arguing he's not a sexy man.
No, I didn't really care for him.
That last shot of episode 8, come on.
That's not even the sexiest. It's when he's tempting her. It's when they're by the are they by the Glanduin or what is it?
Glanduin.
That's when he's tempting her. He's like, "Hey, I'm gonna make us 2 crowns, and we're gonna, have some power. We're gonna have some rings of the power." It only got better. It had to be so hard to decide how much, how little to give us, and the hints were there all along, and I was picking up on them, and I'm a genius. Not really. They just were being obvious, and
it was very obvious.
It is very obvious in the best way possible, though. I think I just am really satisfied with how that turned out. I will say they bungled how quickly he left. They could have held on to, revealed to us that he was Anatar.
Yeah.
There's certain things where if you go back to listen to even our last episode where we broke down the 8th episode, that every storyline got bungled basically
in that last episode.
It just did. Maybe the strangers kind of gets wrapped up nicely.
I think that was the best one in terms of pacing throughout the season. Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's not forget, we didn't even see them for an episode and a half.
Yeah.
But
it worked.
It did work. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. It's just, let's not forget that they also went, okay, this is where this part of the story, even in going back to rewatching it, episode 7, which I hated, I actually like it so much better now. It's still really weird. Gladriel's being really weird, but there's so much other grief and loss going on that makes it. Even her reflectiveness is good too.
That episode is the most rich in terms of like exploring and getting to know the characters, which is why I really enjoyed it when it first. The week we watched it.
One of the things that Brad Grant said was that the show is at its best when it's when it's just letting the relationships do the work.
Which is why I want to. Well, can I pick 2 in terms of my favorite characters?
You're such a cheater. Yeah, Elrond and Durin, we all know. Big surprise.
If I'm forced to pick one, I would probably go.
Ooh, this is hard. You actually have to pick one.
Ooh. I'd probably go Elrond. Yeah. Because I like look, I like Durin's arc. Because obviously
petulant.
Yeah, well, and yes, and I enjoy, and this is just by my own bias, the implications of them taking what happened with Eärendil and extrapolating that and asking, how would this affect Elrond as a character? And I really liked seeing those ideas fleshed out with Elrond. In terms
of his dad?
Yes, Eärendil, his father, the star. seeing that fleshed out in him wanting to prove himself and live up to his father's legacy, because that's a massive shadow to live under. So I really enjoyed seeing that, and just seeing how he is just such a good person. He's just trying to stick to his word. And Doran is too, but I don't know. It's like such a slim margin between them, but obviously
that's chemistry, right? At the end of the day,
yes,
it's great casting. Yeah.
Owain Arthur, I would say, as a character, Elrond probably takes the cake for me, but I think Owain Arthur gives the best performance in the entire series.
So you're just kicking Lloyd Owen to the curb?
He's again a close second for me.
You're kicking him to the curb.
That trio, Lloyd Owen, Owain Arthur, Robert Aramayo, is like, for me, that's like the core of this show in terms of the performances. I think Owain Arthur, though, because the heard round the world.
Oh, it's the heard round the world. It's the best.
Yeah, that's
whose hands.
Whose hands? Yeah.
Here's something that I'm beginning to. Well, not beginning to. Well, I've seen you are remaining true to yourself. You love the representation of male friendship and love, and not having it be exploited or made toxic. And it's not shocking that your favorite performances derive strongly from these men maybe being afraid to be vulnerable at one point, but then either being unable to withhold their vulnerability, etc. Something I was thinking about that I hadn't thought about with anyone really is we have to watch all of these characters get to the point in history where we know them in 5 years or 5 seasons. And the person that made me realize that the most is Isildur. And that's a hard person to cast the role in, because you need to like him, but then you need to feel like you need to like him, and you need to understand why he feels like he doesn't need to cast the ring aside and why he's drawn to power. So like everyone's going to be tempted by power, and you have to assume that the ring is tempting him and making him. We've talked about this before on the episodes leading up to the Ring of Power. He claims it as Weregild, and Elrond and Gil-galad's dead, but Elrond's like, yeah, cast it in. He's like, I know.
Is there?
Círdan is like, hey, cast it in. He's like, no, I'm going to keep it. And they're like, oh, okay, whatever. Because I mean, not really, but I think it's not how the movies depict it, right?
It's not a cast it in. Like Elrond and Círdan hear Isildur claiming it as Weregild, and they go, all right, I mean, we can understand that it's valid, and they're not like, no, it's not this big, like, melodramatic moment, which works for film.
But I was thinking, so it's understandable. He's lost his dad, right? Spoilers. And so he thinks the ring probably exists as a memoriam to him too, right? But he's got to be a little selfish to keep that ring as well. And we see him be a little selfish at the top of this series, where he's making decisions that only affect him. He wants to get away from Numenor. Like he's really worried about how he operates in the world. And I think I'm making big extrapolations about this character. But
yes,
we do have to see him make an interesting choice down the road, which if they've done their homework and the right work, we should see the buddings of those character choices and growth in this season.
I mean, yeah, I think, not to jump too far ahead, but predictions with Isildur for season 2 is, we're going to see the seeds planted for his rulership of the realms in exile. Because that's where he's got to get to in season 5.
Oh, well, he will already be there. Because he's going to be found.
We'll see how they do things.
Yeah, I mean,
they can play with time. They have played with time, so who knows when the realms of exile are going to be founded.
I doubt he'll go back to Numenor, is my point.
He has to. Well, he doesn't have to.
He does not have to.
If they want to have Isildur do the things he does in the books, he's going to go back to Numenor.
His father could, Muriel could. Certain things can change, and I think they may change them. I just would have a hard time seeing how and why he'd get back to Numenor, especially seeing how long it takes them to get to Numenor, to leave Numenor in the first place.
Yeah,
if they wanted him there, they would have taken him there.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying I have a reason. I'm just saying, like,
I think if I'm making predictions big timeline wise, it's season 1 is the setup of what we got, and like we get the forging of the 3. Season 2, we're getting set up for the downfall of Numenor. And then I don't know, season 3 or 4 is probably, I would imagine season 4 is downfall of Numenor, and then, or season 3, and then season 4 is like foundation of realms in exile if we're just following the Numenor plotline.
And how they all get together to.
Yeah. Like, so season 3 will end with the downfall maybe, and then, their exiles, they get to Middle Earth. Season 4 is them like founding the realms, and then season 5 is the last alliance. In terms of Numenor plotline. So they could get Isildur back to Numenor by season 3.
Yeah, potentially.
And then season 2 is just him off doing stuff in Pelargir, maybe, which they've set up. I guess that's what I'm trying to
say. But we are digressing. I do want to say too, another of our friends of the podcast, Geeks with Shields, said more Duran and Elrond. So you're not alone in that. I'm really curious to see. I'm curious to see if Disa ends up going full Lady Macbeth and murdering the king. She's not going to.
I don't think she's going to murder Durin the Elder, but
I wonder if she ends up with a ring also.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because this is the question. This is the question that looms over this entire show.
Who's getting a ring?
Who getting them rings?
Yeah.
Who getting them rings? There's 7 dwarf rings. And now we know that a lot of them go to different dwarven kings, so whatever.
And there are lords, they've already referred to them, and we learn that Durin has brothers.
I think it's likely.
Again, they're setting up her power drive.
Yes.
And you brought up a really interesting point while we were rewatching the episodes. She was the reason they found Mithril.
Yes.
And now, if we take one step backward before where I'm going, I think it's Legolas who's like, I can hear what the rocks are thinking, and Gimli is not the one who could say that. Like, they do listen to the rocks, but like,
the rocks speak to him,
to Legolas, right? Yeah. So canonically, Gimli's not being talked to by rocks, but he just knows rocks, or stone, I should say. But Disa sings a whole plea to the mountain of releasing the miners.
Yeah.
She speaks about the rock, the stone telling you where to go and where not to go. You know, she has the communion with them.
Emphasis on where she says the mountain tells you where not to dig.
So what the heck, Disa?
Yeah, right?
What's her motivation?
Yeah, it
can't be an oversight.
She finds Mithril via her, I don't remember the name, stone speaking or whatever it's called, her song.
Making the stone cry.
Yes.
Another sign of vulnerable imagery.
More mountains crying
please.
On film and TV, please, creators. Yeah, so the ostensibly the mountain speaks back and tells where to dig and where not to dig. One then would think the mountain would be like, hey, maybe don't dig with this where this mithril is. But if that's the case, then she still was like, hey, there's this mithril here, let's go. And she's bent on, in that last scene we get with her with Durin the Younger, she's like, the mithril's ours, or it will be.
Right.
And we need to prove, like in the scene earlier, we need to prove we can mine it safely and all that stuff. So if she did indeed get that word from the mountain, like, hey, don't mine here, she's not heeding that. because maybe she sees that this is a thing that could be good for the dwarves. So I don't know.
I just thought that was an interesting. At the end of the day, what the writers did, like it or not, they set up all the things they wanted to set up, and they followed through with their intentions throughout the season. And I think they did it well from a storytelling standpoint, which would lead me to believe that they've got a pretty good idea about where they're going. And they have I bet you they have people reading the script 500 times, because what else did we notice? The bind yourself to me. I want to bind it to my
appeared multiple times.
These recurring phrases. It's not surprising you have 4 writers to an episode, because people are scouring it to make sure that if you're going to spend an hour on this episode, you're going to make sure everything means something.
Yeah.
Which is why the leaf woke up the Balrog. I rest my case. I rest my case.
On a serious note, because I don't want to get into that. I don't want to relitigate the leaf. But yeah, the light and the dark themes as well. The reflection themes, like visually, sort of inverting things, right? We just rewatched recently the Eye episode, right. Episode 7, where you have the inverted camera after she has touched the darkness of the cloud coming. Like, so well done, because that's mirroring like the reflection, which then you get later on in the finale where she's looking down. Yeah, visually and thematically, there's a lot of amazing things happening in the show that they tie together and weave throughout the season. I agree there. But yeah, the pacing for me at the end, if I'm looking at downsides, it felt rushed. I wish I cared more about the only thing I don't think, and again, they're thinking big picture, which I have to just trust.
Yeah, sure.
Because they're thinking 5 seasons. They know they have
and they're
5
hoping
seasons.
that their older actors aren't going to die, which I think is really irresponsible. But carry on.
Well, they don't have to worry about Tarpalantir anymore.
That's fair.
I mean, the other actors are not, Lenny Burrows, or not Burrows. That's Lenny Sadek. I can't remember the actor's name.
Why? I know.
I'm just thinking of the older actors on the show, and then their characters died, so maybe they're planning for that. No, we wish them all the best health, the actors. I have to trust they're setting up things down the line, but for me in this season, Farazan, Kemen, and Aarion. Farazan a little bit, I was fine with the amount we saw him and stuff. But Kemen and Aarion were just like given the short end of the stick.
But that's like, why do you need them then? Like, what do we need them to be able to witness Farazan? Probably, which is fine. But because you're right, like even the Farazan arc sets up, he's not a major player right now, and that's okay. But they set up, even in a rushed way or whatever, this guy's conniving. This guy has plans. And he wants to be in power.
I understand Farazan's motivations much more than Kemen and Aarion.
And they did it in a slow burn over the 8 episodes, and they didn't need to give us anything more than what we saw, and it worked. I guess my question is, why do we need Kemen and Aarion? That's not... I don't care. Yeah. I don't like them. I don't care.
I
am jealous of her.
Sure.
Fluffy lip lady.
I hope they're going to become more important in the next season, but again, I don't know.
To what end,
None of us
though?
know.
What point are they going to serve in the story?
They are going to be, ostensibly, on Farazan's team, the Kingsmen, if that's what they call it in the show, opposed against Muriel and Elendil and hopefully Anarion, the faithful, and those are going to. So that's how I see it sort of shaking out, is on Team Farazan / Kingsman, you have Farazan at the head, and then you have Kemen and Aarion, and then on Team Faithful / Muriel, you have Muriel, Elendil, and maybe Anarion, if they introduce Anarion on screen in this next season.
Right.
So I think
or
that's
Círdan,
why.
right? Could Círdan show up for this?
No, he's in Middle Earth.
I don't know where he's going.
Although he is friendly with some of the Numenorians who do sail into port. I doubt they would touch on that kind of relationship because that would have been, I think, was it Aldarian, I think? Anyway, we're getting into deep lore stuff that doesn't matter. That would have been a long time in the past, I believe,
Gotcha.
from when we are now.
So one of the things I didn't quite understand, but now I do, because I didn't quite understand it, I thought it left the door open to what Aarion saw when she touched the Palantir, which we didn't see it. We just know that she pulled off the thing, and
we don't know if she touched it.
We don't even know if she touched it. And one of the things I think we had even bandied about is like, is she going to be a Kingsman or is she going to see what the thing is? But I didn't understand this. There's two things that happen. Muriel doesn't know when she touches the Palantir, she can see the future of Numenor. That's it. She's just looking at the future of Numenor.
And not the future, but specifically one vision.
One vision over and over again. And I do think Palantir thinks he's talking to Muriel, because I think he said not even the first sentence too, when he says, "I know what you've been doing in the dead of night."
I think they did a clever thing that confused me, but then I thought about it and I was like, that's clever. Is he says it and you go, why is he saying this to Aarion? And then you realize he's talking to Muriel, or he thinks he's talking to Muriel. I think that line is him talking to Muriel, but it serves a dual purpose for the viewer, cueing us into the fact that Aarion's been maybe doing some shady stuff.
I agree. So yes, I definitely think, because he basically is saying, you've been consulting the Palantir over and over again. So what I didn't quite understand is she didn't know what brought on the downfall of Numenor. She just knew it was happening.
She believes, and she says this to Galadriel.
But that's what her extrapolation was.
Yes.
She had no cause to believe that by continuing to distance themselves from the elves, that's what she assumed would keep so what she was probably doing. Am I not making sense?
No, so her rationale is not, if we distance ourselves from the elves,
that's what it was before.
No.
When she was sending them.
No, her thinking is, she's afraid of rebellion. Because when Tar Palantir, her father, openly returned to the old ways, there was civil unrest, and he was basically pushed out. And that's why Muriel is now Queen Regent, along with his decline. So she is afraid of causing unrest again. And she believes that she needs to toe a hard line and keep order, or Numenor's downfall will occur. So in her mind, and that's why she's resistant to sailing to Middle-earth, because she believes that allying herself closely with the elves again could potentially cause unrest.
That's what I was saying.
Okay, I thought you were saying she wanted to return to the old ways.
No.
Okay,
no.
I misunderstood you then.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying maybe I wasn't being clear. So, So this is what and I'm realizing even now as I'm talking, she's probably going to the Palantir every night going, did the decision I make today change it? Did the decision I make today change it? Is this the right decision?
Maybe.
I can only imagine that. Why else go to that Palantir over and over again if it's only going to show you one image of the downfall of Numenor, if not to see if you're making the right choices to prevent it.
So you're assuming that she's been frequently consulting the Palantir because of what Tar Palantir says, I know what you've been doing.
I think that's what I would.
Okay, that's an interesting read. I didn't personally get the impression that she was like constantly consulting the Palantir.
I mean, that's why we see her with her dad, and that's where Galadriel finds her. It's not surprising that Bearzon knows where she is. I just think the Palantir and her vision of the downfall of Numenor is important, and it's haunting her. And so she sends Galadriel out and says, bye-bye, Galadriel, thinking that she did the right thing. And it wasn't until the leaves of the tree start falling, or she's like, actually, I think this isn't the right thing.
Right.
So I'm just saying that's interesting that she's trying to actively stop the downfall of Numenor.
Right.
One thing to think about, because what my whole point was, maybe it left the door open for Aarion to become sympathetic again, or realize that she was wrong. All Aarion saw was the downfall. All Aarion saw was the wave hitting Numenor, because that's all Galadriel saw.
Yeah.
So no one else is seeing. If we're to believe what the writer said is true, no one else is seeing anything else except that over and over again.
Correct.
So it probably does fortify her belief that they made the wrong choice to go to the Southlands.
Yeah, if she did indeed touch it and see that vision, she is going to come to a different conclusion based upon that image than Muriel did.
100%.
And her conclusion is going to be the actions that Muriel took are leading to this. And Muriel 100%. Is going to say, well, maybe we're closer to avoiding it. Both of them not knowing that they're both wrong. And neither of those things are the reason Numenor is going to fall, which I'd love.
Yeah.
They're both wrong.
I really like that they did not, that was not a heavy-handed, I just got to sort through that now. You know what I mean? Yeah. I love that that's not a heavy-handed thing, but it's, and again, if you're a new audience member and you didn't read the Silmarillion or whatever, you're like, what is happening?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
But it's great. You're just along for the ride.
It's a good bit of foreshadowing, and it sets up, reasons for the acceleration of this conflict, which we saw, again, it's been a long time that the division, that they've been drifting from the elven ways and being elf friends, but it's a good way to accelerate that civil unrest and give Sauron something to drive a wedge between, a little bit more than he had. So
so it will be interesting. That will be interesting to see how and when Sauron can come back.
Yeah, I'm curious as to, because again,
they made a huge challenge for themselves.
In the books, he is captured. So it's like, it's not an Anatar thing. So ostensibly it'll be when he just brings war to Middle Earth, which will probably happen.
I see. So they do know I forgot. They know it's him, and they're like, oh no, he's a bad guy. And then Pharazon's like, I can, it's the
Pharazon,
power.
He's power hungry, he's cocky, and they have a massive force. And so the reason Sauron gives in is because A, he sees an opportunity, and B, he's scared of the force of the Númenóreans compared to his orc armies, and armies of men and stuff. I mean, it'll be cool to see that moment. Will Charlie Vickers still be playing Sauron at that point? Even
I'm really curious. Well, see, I think if he's going to go to Númenor, yes, but like he's got to go get Mithril from Durin. Durin doesn't know who the heck he is. Elrond does, though.
No, he doesn't.
Well, he probably will.
He just knows Galadriel is being shady about something. So I'm excited, looking forward.
But also, Elrond and Durin have no reason to talk ever again.
Oh, yeah, I think we're not going to see, sadly, I don't think we're going to see a lot of Durin/Elrond season 2. Maybe we'll get like clandestine meetings, which spicy.
Yeah, it sounds like a great /fic.
Oh yeah, you fic writers, get on it. We'll maybe see some clandestine meetings in secret if they can. But yeah, I mean, it's not like because Elrond's going to be going back to Lindon, I'm assuming. I
mean,
he did the thing they set out to do in Eregion, so he's back to Lindon, right? So that's pretty far from Khazad-dûm. They're not exactly going to just meet up for coffee. You know what I mean? So yeah, we're probably not going to see a lot of Elrond/Durin. Maybe we'll get a little bit here and there in some pivotal moments. But yeah, the people in Khazad-dûm are clueless as to all of this. And yeah, they have no reason to be informed by the elves if and when Galadriel chooses, if or when Galadriel chooses to inform anybody, which she doesn't have a reason to do. Because remember, It's going to reflect badly on her, unless it's coaxed out of her or Elrond figures it out or things change. But she's going to want to keep that under wraps.
I want to ask you a question, but I want to say this first.
Okay.
I hate it when the entire plot relies on, I'm not going to tell you a secret because I'm afraid of how you're going to react.
Yeah, it's like, just communicate, people.
I mean, it's a bad trope, and it perpetuates a bad human nature
it's
aspect.
Especially bad in, I mean, this is what everyone criticizes so many sitcoms and rom-coms for, is there just would not be a story or plot if the characters would talk to each other about stuff.
So Heartbeats, when we did the improvised medical drama over the pandemic, I love Grey's Anatomy, so I poured over all that like 100 times over, but started creating our structure for how do you improvise a medical drama? What's the story arc? And basically at a certain point in the run, I just said, please just don't tell anybody the truth. Just lie. You are teenagers running around in a hospital and someone let you loose.
Yep.
That's it. Yep. And everyone's afraid to get caught. And it doesn't matter what you did, just lie.
Because that's where all the dramatic tension comes from.
That's all it is. And no one learns a thing ever. And nothing matters. And it's just like, that's actually, my dad would criticize Full House. He's like, so within 25 minutes, they resolve a problem, and then they're just going to lie again next week. Yeah. He just hated how unrealistic it was. He also hated the Rugrats because he thought that it was a very bad representation of parenthood, which I didn't know this, but they were parents from Hollywood. They were like Los Angeles parents.
Right.
Which is a whole nother layer. Mm-hmm. Anyway, super digression.
But yeah, there are no character arcs. There's no character growth on sitcoms. That's just, otherwise the format breaks down.
And again, we still have 5 seasons to watch Galadriel's growth. Yeah. What a bad choice, though, to have her lie to her closest friend. You know what I mean?
Well, and here's the thing I don't like. Here's the reason I don't like. I don't want to get super negative, but earlier in the episode, in episode 8, right? Elrond, unprovoked, makes a promise to Galadriel, I'll never doubt you again. And then immediately that becomes super handy for Galadriel. Oh, now I have this big secret that I can't tell anybody about, and I need to do things because I have this secret, but I can't tell them the secret, right? Oh, great. I'm glad Elrond made me that promise. I can just invoke that promise, which Elrond's big on the oaths and promises this season, which I'm fine with, but it just was such a convenience.
Oh, he totally was.
It was such a convenience for them to have Elrond make this oath, and we know he's big about keeping oaths. That is specifically just like, I will implicitly trust you. And then Galadriel needs him to implicitly trust her so that plot can happen and they can make the rings without Galadriel having to or when she barges in.
Her whole thing is to prove that Sauron's around. Her whole thing. That's it. That's the whole
But now
reason.
she can't.
Hold on. Yes, she can. Because her closest friend just said, whatever it is, tell me and I'll help you. And she won't tell him. It's dumb.
But the way the oath was worded was, I don't know the specific wording, but it was, I won't make that mistake again of not trusting you. And so then Galadriel, like, Elrond's confused about like the make 3 thing, and like where's Halbrand, like, and she just goes, just trust me. And
it's actually bad Galadriel growth right there. I'm gonna criticize that. It's bad. I don't like it. It makes her unlikable even more, and it's a bad choice.
I'm just like, and I said, I don't want to relitigate this, but I was
okay. Well, what else are we on a podcast for, Alex?
I know. I just feel bad harping on the criticisms of the show, but because there's so much I love. But
it's what our job is. I mean, it's not our job, but it's not above reproach.
No, it's not. I just don't get what Galadriel's up to.
Motivation.
I don't know. I don't get it. Like, and you pointed this out, like, oh, she just wants to help Elrond and like make these things to save the elves, which, yeah, but
she does understand that, and she also wants a power over Sauron. She wants to kill him still.
But she knows that he knows that she's doing exactly what he wants. Except for the make 3 thing, which whatever. But.
Right. I'm not saying it's complicated in a great storytelling way. It's complicated in a messy storytelling way.
Yes, because it's confusing. I don't like complexity is fine if I can wrap my head around it after multiple watchings and dissecting it and sitting on it. But if it's just the more I think about it, the more I don't understand and the more I get confused. Like. Ugh.
It feels like she made rings because she knew that at the end of the Silmarillion, they got handed rings, and so she has to make the rings because Tolkien writes it that way. I'm obviously joking.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you was about the Tree of Linden.
Oh, yeah. So when we were rewatching, I noticed that, well, let me preface this. Well, no, I'll just say what I noticed. So Elrond specifically mentions about the tree that is in Durin's home, that it is a seedling of the great tree of Linden, which Gil-galad says is a symbol of their people. And that's why when Gil-galad sees the corruption, he interprets
Assumes.
He interprets that for whatever reason as meaning our souls are going to die because the tree is dying and is corrupted, right? So ostensibly there's a link between if our souls are corrupted, therefore the tree is corrupted, right? It reflects our souls or something. And, this is, I think they're sort of drawing a parallel because this wasn't a thing that existed in the canon or any of the stories like a tree of Linden, but they're drawing a parallel between Numenor and them having the tree and later the seedlings in Gondor.
That's a good point. Yep.
So my thought was, because I am a believer that despite us seeing Mithril cure the leaf, I am a believer that the corruption of the tree is a deliberate misdirection from Sauron to manipulate the elves in order to get them to seek Mithril, because I guess he knew that Gil-galad would interpret the song of the roots of the Hithai-Glir to mean that Mithril contained the light of the Silmarils in it. And therefore, it would drive the elves to get Mithril, and he could exploit that in his creation of the rings. Because in his experiments, he knew that
he was missing something.
Yeah, he figured out somehow that Mithril was the missing ingredient to harness the power over the unseen world. So, my belief is that Sauron... No, I guess this is the way I could rationalize it. He knew that Gil-galad would believe all those things if he just made the tree corrupted. So he planted corruption on the tree. It's not that the tree is reflecting the state of the souls of the elves. It's that it's being corrupted by an external force. So the souls of the elves are fine, the tree's corrupted. And I'm grasping at straws here, but I found that piece of evidence with, okay, so let's pretend it's true. Let's pretend that all of what I said is wrong, and let's pretend the souls of the elves are corrupted, and it's just being reflected in the tree of Linden, right? So it's not an external force like Sauron corrupting it. It's just a natural state because it's reflecting the souls of the elves. Wouldn't, therefore, then the seedling tree reflect that state as well? We don't see
especially if it's like corrupting more quickly. It's like it's apparently it's accelerated.
Right. So we don't know if there are multiple seedlings. All we know is that there's one seedling and it was given to Durin. And we see the tree and it's totally fine. So
and
one would believe that tree too would be corrupted.
Here's why I think that you have to believe that. Is because the white tree of Numenor has been created from a seedling several times and still reflects the state of the fate of men.
Now,
so
here's the thing we don't know, because there are many seedlings of that tree, I believe, but is there some like hierarchical status where if the daddy/mommy tree dies, then that's the only way that the tree can have a mystical connection in reflecting the state of its people? Like, we don't know the exact mechanics. But
hit me over the head and tell me when it's over, if that's what it is.
Yeah, again, we don't know, but and the reason I'm thinking okay, well, Sauron wouldn't know to corrupt. He wouldn't know there's a seedling tree. He wouldn't know to corrupt that one too.
Right.
So I don't know.
There's a few things that are just open-ended in a fun way.
Yeah.
That I think we will have many a year to
2 years.
grow on until they get season 2. Before I ask you for what you're wanting or what you think is going to happen in an overview sense, is there anything you want to talk about also?
Yeah. Specifically the things we know. Now, I don't typically like to be the kind of person who's, and I did this leading up to Rings of Power because I was so excited, but I typically am not the person who's like scouring the web for like exclusives or, like, oh, we found this out from set. But based on interviews, we know, and there could be more that I'm not aware of, but we know 2 things. We know Círdan.
Right.
Okay. Which makes sense. Okay. Because, and let me see if you remember this, Jess. Pop quiz time. New segment on the show, pop quiz for Jess.
No, no. I quit.
In relation to the rings, why is Círdan important?
Because he sailed his ship to Arendelle and then asked for the light of the Silmaril in order to put it into the rings. I don't know.
He was the wielder of Narya for a time.
Oh, sure.
And then when Gandalf comes over on the ship from the west, he gives it to Gandalf because he's like, you know what? You seem cool.
Right.
So he's going to be one of the bearers of the 3 rings, and they were just made. So it makes sense for him to be season 2. So
it'll be Elrond and Galadriel and Gil-galad, though.
No. Well,
because Gil-galad's going to demand a ring.
Yeah, Gil-galad gets Narya.
Mm-hmm.
Galadriel gets Nenya. Or excuse me, Gil-galad gets. I almost just got.
You just said Círdan got that one.
I almost just got ratioed there, as they say on Twitter. Okay. No, Gil-galad gets, Vilya, which he later then Elrond inherits. Galadriel gets Nenya, and then Círdan gets Narya, which he later gives to Gandalf. Gotcha. So yeah, are they gonna follow that? Who knows?
What if Círdan comes in and is revealed to be the lover of Celebrimbor?
I'm all for it.
I think I've never wanted anything more in my life.
I would love that. Honestly, there's no reason for him to do it, but there's no reason not for him to do it. Just seeing the amount of people that would be pissed off about that for stupid reasons would be very funny.
So worth it.
Like depending on how they do it, I could be pissed off at that, but I'm not pissed off at the idea of it.
I'd be thrilled if they made Celeborn a woman. Come on, let's go. Let's do it. I don't know.
I would be against that.
I know. I understand. I know. She literally has to have a child with him.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's very funny. So we do know Círdan. Shipwright's going to be there. They have also released that there's a young actor that's been cast. He kind of has a Daniel Wayman look to him. But he also has a young Adar look to him as well, too.
Oh.
But there's no release as to who he will be cast as.
Okay. There was one other thing I saw that was like they cast, and who knows if this is true, but it was like they cast an actor as, I think it was Viron was the character name, which people said is close to like a, not palindrome, but where if you flip it, an anagram, I guess. It's an anagram of Narvi, which is a dwarven character that exists who made the doors of Durin. So they're like, oh, is this like a dwarf character? Who knows? Obviously we're going to be getting new dwarf characters because now that the Khazad-dûm storyline has been sort of sundered from the elves, we're going to have a lot going on just with Khazad-dûm, maybe Sauron coming in, inner politics with the dwarf lords that Disa mentioned, and sort of the struggle for the throne. So obviously we're going to be meeting some new dwarves, probably a dwarf lord or two. And we need people for those 7 rings to go to. So But the other thing that was in an interview, I think, with Charlie Vickers, was that we're going to be seeing a similar thing to what we got with Galadriel in season 1 with the flashback episode.
What do you mean? Huh?
So in episode 1 was Galadriel VO. What happened? First Age, Elder Days stuff.
Oh.
Apparently, we're going to be seeing some of that for Sauron.
Oh, I mean, we do need to know what happened between him and Adar.
Look, if episode 1 of season 2, the whole runtime for an hour, look, make it 2 hours, I don't care, explains to me in 2 hours worth of episode, and the only thing they explain to me is why Sauron was on that raft, I'll be happy.
Worth it.
I'll be happy. If they just give me that one, like, I want to know. I want to know, why was he on that raft?
I understand. It's frustrating. I didn't clock this. And I was also the first person at the top of this episode to remind you that this show is great for people who have never seen a Lord of the Rings. They're just loving it. Alex, I didn't understand this, but the reason they had Fiona Apple do that song was so that people knew that there will be more rings coming.
Yeah, because they don't look in the prologue to Fellowship of the Ring. Peter Jackson, we get the ring poem, and at the end of season 1 of Rings of Power, we get the ring poem.
So I just kind of thought it was funny because the creator said, as Fiona Apple sings at the end of that we know that there's 7 more rings. And I'm like, oh my God, it's genius because you have to know.
Here's what I will say though. I didn't make that connection, but I would criticize that choice then. Because look, it we joke about spoilers on this show, right? Like, spoilers, Isildur's not dead. But for the viewer who really doesn't care, for the viewer who is not going to go read Lord of the Rings
or whatever.
Yeah, there's plenty of people out there who are, I'm sure, just tuning in for Rings of Power, and in the 2 years between seasons, they're not going to go read the books or watch the movies, which is fine. More power to them. Why spoil the fact for them that there's going to be more rings?
Actually, not a bad point.
You know what I mean? Like, similarly to the Mordor.
Oh my God!
You know,
unforgivable.
Yeah, unforgivable. Similar to the Mordor title reveal. Like, why? We all know. Again, who's it for? Right? We all know. Just you don't need. I mean, look, I like Fiona Apple, and I thought it was a fine song, but if you're looking at it from that perspective of, oh, we got to tell people there's more rings. Why? Just let them figure it out. They'll find out in season 2.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I know, because otherwise I was like, oh no, that's so sad. But I'm trying to be inclusive of a bunch of people that don't know half the things that we know or you know or whatever. But it is pretty dorky.
Well, and also for the new viewer, they would listen to that, never being familiar with the ring poem, and go, what's she singing about all these other rings?
What is she singing
there's only 3.
about? Yeah.
There's only 3 rings. What does she mean? I don't get it.
They didn't make the one?
Yeah, where are all these other rings at? Did I miss a couple episodes?
Are there 9 men? I can't. Yeah, 100%. That's such a good point. I would never have thought of that as the reason until the creator said, as Fiona Apple's.
Yeah.
Like, no, just reference the Tolkien poem.
Right.
Like, as we all know from the poem.
From the book.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so we know a couple things going into it. There's huge question marks. Like, is Sauron really just adrift? And happens to meet the most important elf in the first, second, and third age. The most Alex, the most important elf.
Well, I don't know.
The most important elf.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, I know about it. Everyone likes her a lot.
Sure.
But just so happens to meet her. It's frustrating.
The creators hinted in interviews it indeed was a Tolkienian chance meeting, but I really hope that's not the case. I really hope in this flashback we get more in season 2 about what his, like, again, just tell me why he's there. Tell me why he's there. We'll find out in a couple years.
Anything else you can think of that?
I think the other thing I'm really looking forward to is we haven't really talked about him, is seeing more Adar.
Honestly,
Because my favorite scene, even though Elrond and Durham were my favorites, my favorite scene was the Galadriel Adar conversation. So.
That scene makes me so uncomfortable.
It's all the Dutch angles. Shot entirely in Dutch angles.
I know. I'm aware. I caught it.
Yeah.
I know that, it's like the third man all over again. But but yes, there's amazing things that we get from that. I actually love when he's like, do you know who I am? No. Like, it's just such amazing. He killed it, man.
Yeah.
For a character that didn't exist, he might as well be right up there with all of them. And I think it's so important what you brought up, and it's commendable for the creators to decide to humanize, quote unquote, the orcs. I think it's a really brave choice.
Yeah, I mean, bringing up the fact that, and it's based in the way that Tolkien was working through, his conception of orcs as beings, as Adar says, we were created by the wielder of the secret flame, right? We feel the light of Eru just as you do. So putting a spotlight on that and not shying away from or not addressing that question, I love it. So the fact that they did that with Adar is great, and that they could take that idea and extrapolate it into a character of, we know we know if we choose to believe this version of the Tolkien origin of orcs, which was only one of many, and probably wouldn't have been his final one if he had lived, however long to figure it out. Yeah. I mean, his story would never be done. If he was immortal, it would constantly be changing.
That's what I was going to say. He's like, oh, wait, Galadriel's cool, but who is Margarian?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, taking that idea and then going, all right, let's address this, centralize it in this story, and create a character that highlights it. I love. And a villain that's opposed to Sauron. It's great. I love it. And the actor, great performance.
I really thought he was going to be the big bad, and we were going to see him be defeated by the end of this season, and it's so awesome that we get to see him again. I'm totally with you. It's almost as if like racism has been an issue for a long time and like still is.
Nah. Couldn't be true.
Couldn't be true. One way I really think we could just put a nice little bow on this is predict what our Antimo boy is going to do in the next season.
Oh, well, okay. He's on. Well, here's the first question in my mind. No, he's on the boat back home because he's like, I've seen enough.
Yeah.
So he's on the boat back home. He's not going to be with the garrison.
No.
Left behind. So he's on the boat back home. They get in.
He gets married.
Yeah, they see the, he mourns for the king.
Sure.
And then he is embraced in his lover's arms, and he puts down his sword forever. I actually
think somehow he gets like to the point where he has to kill Kemen.
Oh, like, and he has to face the
only one who could do it.
He has to face his fears. Oh man. That's a good arc for him. Is having to pick up the blade once more.
Because his father-in-law is going to be Pharazôn or something like that. Who knows?
Oh, that's Kemen's sister that he's...
Yeah.
Or something happens, God forbid, something happens to his fiancée, and it's Kemen's fault. And it's a John Wick style...
I was going to say, or he turns into Batman somehow. He's like, I'm afraid of battle, but I will.
Oh my God. The vigilante crime fighter in Numenor.
My God.
Yeah.
No, part of me thinks so you know how, like I said, that he dies, right? Like we see we see him save Isildur, and he's the one who makes sure Isildur can get out of the house, but the house collapses on him.
Antimo?
That was my Antimo.
Oh, yeah.
I think we have I think Beric finds him. I think he lives out his days in the Southlands.
Wait, okay. So what we saw happened, but they just didn't stop long enough to check the pulse.
Sure, that's not what I meant, but yeah,
Barrick
sure.
runs in, finds and saves Isildur, and then turns, and then that was my terrible horse impression.
That's horrible.
Horseable. And then
Horseable.
and then he nudges another like broken beam, and Antimo's there, and he just nuzzles Antimo, and he's like, "Well, I'm actually alive.
I'm alive."
And then
the power of horse love.
We get a whole episode. So so I actually did. Like normally you go to like Fellowship of the Fans on Twitter for inside information. I contacted JD Payne. He told me episode 2 is going to be, and maybe 3. They might actually do 2 episodes of this.
He said he's still figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean they're still shooting, so they might expand it. But it's going to be a road trip sequence, like 2 whole episodes. Isildur and Antimo, buddy road trip on Barrick to Pelargir, and that's straight from the horse's mouth.
Great. I think we actually need to stop the podcast now after that pun.
That's been a good
run. So good, Alex. I'm so glad we get to enjoy this show. I look forward to the many years you and I will be able to watch this together.
Yeah.
It's exciting, actually. So stay tuned. We are working out what we're going to continue with, but we're probably going to go in much the same style that we did for this. Choose one of the works one way or another, kind of do deep dives into characters that are integral to one of those works, whether it's the movie, whether it's Rankin Bass, whether it's The Hobbit, etc. And there's a couple of episodes I think here and there, like I just want to talk about Beren and Luthien, and I just want to talk about the dog, just for funsies. So we'll do full little stints on Peter Jackson, and we'll do stints on a book, and we'll do deep dives into characters. And if there's anything you want to know about what we do, we really want to know it, because really we've been so pleased. I knew that we would get a bunch of people listening. I knew this was a perfect wheelhouse for us, and I couldn't be more happy for the community and the listeners that we have, and it's growing and it's exciting. So please let us know that we're giving you what you want. And you can email us at podcastoftherings@gmail.com.
Yeah. And you can go to twitter.com/podoftherings. Yeah. Let us know what adaptation you'd like to see us talk about next, be it the cartoons or the Peter Jackson films or whatever. You can go to patreon.com/podoftherings if you want to support the show financially and get some cool benefits, early access to episodes. There's still that One Ring tier. You can get a special custom t-shirt, only one of a kind, just for you.
All I got was this stupid t-shirt, essentially. It really is just that.
And you could also go to instagram.com/POTRpod, I believe.
Yes, it is. That's correct. Alex.
Jessica.
I love doing this with you.
So much fun.
All right. Until next week.
May our roads meet again.